By the 1950s, air pollution was very visible, with frequent thick black fogs known as smogs in many large cities around the world. The main source of this pollution was from factories, and it caused severe health problems. For example, a particularly severe smog in London in 1952 caused over 4,000 deaths. Obviously, something had to be done, and in 1956, a Clean Air Act was introduced in Britain. This addressed the pollution from factories, and the smog soon disappeared. However, as you know, these days air pollution is still a big issue. The main difference between now and the 1950s is that you can't see it, it's invisible. Also, the main source of pollution now is from cars and lorries, and although these don't produce visible signs, this air pollution is still a significant risk to health. And one of the key factors in the rise of this type of pollution is that we have all become much more vehicle dependent. There are far more cars and lorries, trains and planes than in the 1950s, and this is now the main source of air pollution around the world.
The lecture mentioned about the topics related to air pollution. In 1950, air pollution became the main issue in London because got the many fog and smoke in the large city and the factory and caused very severe problem. Health problem caused 4,000 deaths in London. In 1956, the art in Britain tried to prevent this happen. Air pollution, you can see it, is the main cause of many disease, and it's also the key factor to make it independent, and it's visible for risk to health.
Thermodynamics is the science of the flow of heat. So thermo is heat, and dynamics is the motion of heat. Thermodynamics was developed largely beginning in the 1800s, at the time of the Industrial Revolution. It's the taming of steel, the beginning of generating power by burning fossil fuels. It's universal. Turns out everything around us moves energy around in one way or the other. If you're a biological system, you're burning calories, you're burning ATP, you're creating heat. If you're a warm-blooded animal, you need energy to move your arms around and move around. Mechanical systems, obviously, cars, boats, etc. And even in astrophysics, when you talk about stars, black holes, etc., you're moving energy around, you're moving heat around, and you're changing matter through thermodynamics. And the concepts of thermodynamics have even been applied to economics.
The lecture mentioned about the variety of topics related to dynamics. The first thing he mentioned about dynamics of emotion and how can it develop in 1900. It also related to industrial revolution and generate power. A lot of fossil fuel create energy and then creating the ITP. Health also create more things, and there is move your arm around, and then we move to something else like star, black holes to dynamic related to economics, and this costs more things.
And this illustration often used is the one of the monkeys at the typewriter. Okay, so we have a monkey sitting at a typewriter, and the claim here is basically if you leave chance and time long enough, you will get life. Don't worry about it. Yes, it's strange. Yes, it's wonderful, but leave enough matter, 600 million years on Earth, and you will have life. So the monkey's sitting at the typewriter, and the chances are eventually he produces the complete works of Shakespeare. So what's the problem? So there's no problem. There isn't an issue, right? You just leave him long enough, you'll be fine. And at 1 keystroke a second, the monkey might well eventually get to the complete works of Shakespeare, but he doesn't manage to do it in 600 million years. So what I decided to do to run the numbers is instead of saying type the complete works of Shakespeare, I just ran the numbers for how long would it take a monkey typing at 1 keystroke a second to type to be or not to be, that is the question. And when I ran the numbers, to be or not to be, that is the question, takes 12.6 trillion years to type just that phrase. And a DNA string, which you have to have for like the life we have now, doesn't emerge is not like a sentence's worth of information. A DNA string has got as much information as the Encyclopedia Britannica.
The lectures talk about the relationship between monkey and typewriter because they live long enough in this earth. They live around 600 million years, and how can they complete work? And then he talked about Shakespeare with very famous thing is to be or not to be. Monkey try to manage themselves and type many things in their life, but the question is how long to type this? It takes us 12.6 trillion years to create something, and DNA string is sending a lot of information around, and that is the thing related to this topic, monkey and typewriter.
Joseph Lister was an English surgeon who was the first man to realise the importance of aseptic techniques during surgical procedures. Lister was born in Essex, England, and after obtaining a Bachelor of Arts degree from University College London, he qualified as a doctor in 1852. Lister became assistant surgeon at Edinburgh Royal Infirmary and was later made surgeon at the Glasgow Royal Infirmary in Scotland. The accepted belief at the time was that contact of an open wound with moisture in the air caused infection, so surgical wounds were covered after operating with non-sterile cloths, which increased the risk of infection. Lister refused to accept this theory, and after reading the works of Louis Pasteur, he tried to prevent bacterial infection of surgical wounds by applying pure carbolic acid to surgical dressings, as well as cleaning wounds with the acid during and after surgery. Lister studied the effects of his treatment for 2 years and then published his findings. This led to the adoption of doctors wearing white gowns, which were used to show dirt, and using surgical gauze and carbolic acid to clean wounds after surgery. Lister successfully treated Queen Victoria using his new methods, and he was appointed chairman of clinical surgery at King's College Hospital, London, where he continued his research into antiseptics and clean surgery until he retired in 1893, and died in Kent, England, aged 85.
The topic mentioned about very famous doctor. He from the English, and then he tried to assist to London in the London, and then the thing is the first letter they mentioned about the Scotland, and then the letter open something air and cover some idea related to aseptic theory. He applied some theory on applies in the dressing wound surgery, and he become a public findings in later. Does and do a lot of things in surgery and treatment, create new method, and then he a thing related to research, and he died in England in 1854. Joseph Lister, an England surgeon who was the first man to realize the importance of aseptic technique. Oh my god, this one is
very... Until the advent of the new medications, people diagnosed with schizophrenia occupied 1/2 of the hospital beds in the United States. 1 out of every 10,000 people come down with schizophrenia, and 750,000 are treated every year. Several million people in the United States currently have had this disorder at one time or another in their lifetime.
Although we think of schizophrenia as a mental disorder, the lifetime risk of this illness is the same as for diabetes, which of course is an illness that one hears a lot more about, and for which there's been a lot more research and treatment development. The peak age of onset is somewhat different for men and women. Men usually begin to have difficulties in their late teens or early 20s, whereas women tend to begin to have this illness in their middle 20s and even into their 30s.
The topic mentioned about the something related to health disorder in a people lifetime. The first thing they talk about some medication and the number related to US around 1.5 million, 1.000 million, and 700 trillion every year, but 750 got a ticket. And then this one the thing the mental disorder is very important, and then he moved to something look like more research treatment who develop, and it creates some difficulty for early 20, and then got a lot of some illness goodbye with early 20. Cái này là đi rồi.
Prevention is a cornerstone to any program dealing with the chronic diseases. And we know that with respect to prevention of chronic diseases worldwide, we really need to pay attention to 3 risk factors. Those risk factors are improving diet, increasing physical activity, and eliminating tobacco and smoking. If we pay attention to those 3 risk factors, we will prevent or eliminate 50% of chronic diseases worldwide. That's a dramatic effect. We hope that each center of excellence will be deeply engaged in their local community, that they will understand the risk factors for heart disease and lung disease within their community, that they will develop measures for assessing those risk factors in the community, that they will develop intervention programs by which they cannot just identify the risk factors, but intervene to modify the risk factors. We want to develop the next generation of global health leaders in the chronic diseases. Each of the centers of excellence has a training program. Those training programs are linked with training programs in a developed country, often to a school of public health here in the United States.
Oh, this topic is very interesting when they mention about the program called chronic disease and how it prevents and pay attention some factor. The thing is about diet, physical activity, and other rich. But if you can do it good, it can eliminate 50% of the risk. And then they move to something like the efficiency, something engaging with the local community, lung disease, and that's a good thing when they do some assessment and try to develop some identity, modify the factor, global health leader, and then training program and school public health in US.
But in the face of this sense of disempowerment, there's no decline in involvement in organisations which seek to share wealth and opportunities, which seek to protect one another's rights and work towards the common good. According to the UN, civil society groups have grown 40-fold since the turn of the last century. Last century. Internationally, the non-profit sector is worth $1 trillion. There are 700,000 not-for-profit organisations in Australia alone. 700,000. The UN recognises 37,000 specifically civil society organisations across the globe working in international relief and gives accreditation to many of them. This profound movement towards harnessing voices and resources from outside the realm of governments and officialdom reflects a growth in trust. The third sector, NGOs. Putnam who discovered in the field of local government in Italy, the best predictor of governmental success was the strength and density of a region's civic associations.
They talk about some problem we facing now is the opportunity in the project right, and then the common good it happened in last century. Non-public sector create more things than usual. Around 7,000 public sector in Australia, but in UN, complete like 37,000 civil society intersector, and then they create a lot of creativity and resources, effort, and then NGO, platinum, local government try to put more strength on that, and in the conclusion, civic association is very important. Okay.
Parents completed a questionnaire about the strengths and weaknesses of their kids, and they were also asked to report how much time their children spend watching television. Researchers say those who watch more are more likely to steal or fight by age 7. Then again, they say the overall likelihood of that antisocial behavior is pretty low, and a writer for The Atlantic says the risks discovered are not significant. They failed to look at the content of the shows and games occupying their subjects' time. And all things considered, a mother and blogger for Mother Nature Network says the real danger of too much TV is obesity. And on WLNY, anchors pointed out mobile devices seem to make it easier to give kids TV to watch.
I know it can be challenging. And look, you see people in restaurants now all the time throwing TV shows on the iPad, on the phone to keep kids, occupied. Just maybe watch the clock, too.
Interestingly enough, the researchers said they found no link between computer and electronic games and antisocial behavior. And the experts say, bottom line, it's a good rule of thumb to try to limit how much TV young kids watch to less than 2 hours a day.
The thing they're talking about how long kids need to watch TV, and this repeat the question for many things, and then more and more serious problem happen, create something related to anti-society, and it's very not significant in the content. But there's some subject and blogger very scared about the TV community, and because it can cause obesity. Multi devices can create more chance for children to watch TV. So it like in the iPad, and then mostly in the cartoon, and then the bottom line like limit the time for watching TV in 2 hours.
The shuttle was designed to be a space truck. It's a multi-purpose vehicle. We've done a tremendous number of different things with it. It's the most versatile space vehicle that has ever been built. We've used it to launch satellites. We've used it to repair satellites in orbit and put them back into orbit. We've used it to capture satellites and bring them back to Earth for repair. We've outfitted it with the Space Lab built by our European partners and used it before the era of the space station to do scientific research. We used it as part of our partnership with the Russians, which is still continuing, first as part of the Mir space station, where we actually prolonged the useful life of Mir by several years through logistical supply visits with the shuttle. And now, of course, we're using it to build the new International Space Station, which is a huge international partnership.
And then they're talking about something related to space station partnership. The first thing they mention about is like we need to have some satellite on the Earth, and then how they move to something related to spacecraft in the other space, and then the good thing the lecture mentioned about the space stakeholder. How can they do something conduct some research in the space? That's why they need to partnership with some very strong country like Russia. In the lifetime, very like several years, many structures have been launched, and then they're using new international partnership with.
The first law of thermodynamics, sometimes referred to as the law of energy conservation. The law states energy cannot be created or destroyed. Energy can be described as the ability to do work, where work is the movement of matter when a force is applied to it. The first law of thermodynamics tells us that the amount of energy within any closed system is constant. It doesn't change. The law of energy conservation can be rephrased to say that the change in the internal energy of the system is equal to the difference between the amount of energy coming in minus the amount of energy going out. In other words, the amount of energy in a system can change, but only if it comes from another system or goes to another system. At any rate, systems, whether they're open or closed, do not create or destroy energy. Rather, energy can enter from one system and leave to another.
The thing they talk about the energy, how the low energy create and how it can be destroyed. But then they move to something like how to apply it in the real society. The constant is like they try to rephrase it. They got internal activity, how the energy go in and out, how we could change the energy from this system to another system, open it or close it. That's a very important thing. And then the energy leave to or enter is also very serious thing, and I think that it's dynamic of low energy is very important to create some replace energy. Okay. 10 y 5 read aloud vậy. The second group that is particularly vulnerable are night shift workers, and the third group that is particularly vulnerable are people who sleep disorder, people with the sleep disorder, particularly sleep apnea. 1 out of 3 men and 1 out of 6 women have sleep apnea, and that's 85% are undiagnosed and untreated, and it's more than doubles the risk of crash. The second group that is particularly vulnerable are night shift workers, and the third group that is particularly vulnerable are people with the sleep disorders, and particularly sleep apnea. 1 of 3 men or 1 out of 6 women have sleep apnea, and that's 80% are undiagnosed and untreated, and it's more than doubles at the risk of crash. It is difficult to tell whether the speaker approves of Hemingway's lifestyle or not. He was famously macho and spent a lot of time hunting wild animals and going to wars and getting into fights. All these things got into his books, and the speaker thinks that this is not necessarily a good thing, as it means that too many people refer to read about his life than his books. It is difficult to tell whether the speaker approves of Hemingway's lifestyle or not. He was famously macho and spent a lot of time hunting wild animals and going to wars and getting into fights. All these things got into his books, and the speaker thinks that this is not necessarily a good thing, as it means that too many people prefer to read about his life than read his books. Howard believed that all clouds belonged to three distinct groups: cumulus, stratus, cirrus. He added a fourth category, nimbus, to describe a cloud in the act of condensation in the rain. How is it by observing how clouds change the color and shape. The weather be predicted, and as long as the first three types shit. Howard believed that all clouds belong to three distinct groups: cumulus, stratus, and cirrus. He added a fourth category, nimbus, to describe a cloud in an act of condensation into rain, hail, or snow. It is by observing how clouds change the color and shape that weather can be predicted. As long as the first three types of cloud keep their normal shape, there won't be any rain. Bài này đọc đuối vãi. Ever since I remember, Father woke up at 5:30 every morning, made us all breakfast, and read newspaper. After that, he would go to work. He worked as writer. It was a long time before I realized he did that for a living. Ever since I remembered, Father woke up at 5:30 every morning and made us all breakfast and read news. Ever since I remember, Father woke up at 5:30 every morning, made us all breakfast, and read newspaper. After that, he would go to work. He worked as a writer. It was a long time before I realized he did this for a living. The core of the problem was the immense disparity between the country's productive capacity and the ability of people to consume. Great innovation in productive techniques during and after the war raised the output of industry beyond purchasing capacity of US farmers and others. The core of the problem was the immense disparity between the country's productive capacity and the ability of people to consume. Great innovation in productive techniques during and after the war raised the output of industry beyond the purchasing capacity of US farmers and others. What the heck? And environment problems caused by hard rock mining involve water pollution by metal themselves. Chemicals used in processing acid, drainage, sediment, metals, and metal-like elements in the ore are toxic, prone to cause trouble by ending up the nearby streams and water tables as a result of mining operations. Environment problems caused by a hard rock mining involve water pollution by metal themselves, chemicals used in processing acid drainage and sediment. Metals and metal-like elements in the ore are toxic and prone to cause trouble by ending up in the nearby streams and water tables as a result of mining operations. Polluter loss is officially stated at the planet yesterday when the International Astronomical Union downsized the solar system from 9 to 8 planets. Although there has been passionate debate in the IAU General Assembly meeting in Prague about the definition of planet and whether Pluto meets the specification, and audience graded the decision is good. Pluto lost his official status as a planet yesterday when the International Astronomical Union downsized the solar system from 9 to 8 planets. Although there has been passionate debate at IAU General Assembly meeting in Prague about the definition of the planet, whether Pluto meets the specification, and audience reached the decision to exclude it with the applause. Oh my god, shit. Last one. Parents can communicate their personal feeling about undesirable program both by discouraging their children from watching them and by writing to their local television station or to program sponsors. The public does have a voice. Clearly, not all programs need to please everybody. We do have a choice of program, and we also have a choice for ourselves at least for our youngest children are watching or not watching. There is an off button on every set. Parents can communicate their personal feeling about undesirable programs, both by discouraging their children from watching them and by writing to their local television station or to their program sponsor. The public does have a voice. Clearly, not all programs need to please everybody. We do have a choice of program, and we also have a choice for ourselves and at least for our younger children of watching or not watching. There is an off button on every set.